Hello and welcome to another live stream by Aziel Arts. My name is Thaddeus and I'm a digital and mixed media artist from New York City, and I'm very excited for you to join me again for this live stream where we're continuing our build of this opening shot from Mad Max Fury Road. And we've been building this shot in Unreal Engine over the past, I believe this is the fifth stream. And I think this is going to be the last stream. I think we're almost done, and we're going to be setting up our render settings and animating our camera. So that's what we have in store today. Thanks so much to those of you who are joining me. I'm curious in the chat if you just throw in where you're joining from. I always like to hear what part of the country and world people are joining me from, and also what your experience with Unreal Engine is, because these streams are just a chill working stream where I take you along for the ride as I build something, in this case a shot from a movie in Unreal Engine and other tools, and it's very chill. You can ask questions as I'm working. Feel free to just shout out what you're thinking if you have suggestions. We're just gonna kind of build this together, and I'm going to talk you through what I'm doing as I'm working. That being said, we will probably work on this for close to 45 minutes, 30 to 45 minutes. And then at the end, I will be doing a giveaway to my course package where I teach this sort of stuff with Unreal Engine, making films and animation with Unreal Engine. So stay tuned till the end of the stream for that. But let's jump into it here. I'm gonna minimize this. So this is the shot from the film that we've been building. If I minimize here, I'm gonna jump into Unreal Engine. And if I turn on my lit mode here, this is what our shot looks like so far. And if I'll pull over some image reference I've been using. Maybe I'll put it, always hard to find where to place my head so I'm not blocking anything. But this is what we've built so far. This is our scene as we have it, and like I said, we've been building over the past 4 streams. So if you want to watch through those to help so you can build this yourself, or just see the full process of what we've been doing, you can find a link to the playlist with those streams below this video. But since this is our last stream and I'm gonna be setting this shot up to render and sharing kind of my very simple process for doing that, I thought I would just give a little tour around the scene. So kind of a review of everything we set up, so that y'all can, who are maybe joining and haven't joined those streams, can see, how we actually set this shot up. So let me put my reference to the side here. Okay, so I have here, I'm looking through a camera, so we've already made an empty sequence with a camera here. So I will jump out of the camera real quick and zoom up. So we built a landscape using Unreal Engine's landscape tools, which actually took quite a while to try to match our reference shot, the angle and kind of position of the camera and the shapes that the ground makes. But we eventually arrived at this sort of shape. And what we're doing is we built just the foreground here and a few big, large mountain rocks, which I downloaded off of Quixel Bridge, which if you're new to that, you can come up here to the plus button on the top left corner in Unreal Engine and come to Quixel Bridge. And I believe it's one of the few gigantic mountain models that they have. So I really just took that and placed it in the back corner here to fill out the shot. So that's kind of the midground. And then in the background, we're using a PCG volume, which I show you how to do in the previous stream, to basically randomly place these geometry cards. And they're just single sort of background, not cards, they're, geometry themselves. Let me see if I can actually open up that geometry so you can see what it looks like. So they're basically plates that look like this, which are randomly placed inside of this PCG volume, which I have linked below this video how to set that up. And it's basically just duplicating them and randomly rotating them different directions. And this really creates an effective view into the landscape that it kind of looks like this, you know, vast plain that's going off into the distance. So that's how we achieve this background and midground kind of mountains and background. The sky is actually pretty interesting. We used, these are hand-placed cards, so I'm not using the volumetric sky that comes with Unreal Engine. I'm actually using a cloud system called Easy Fog, which is built by William Foucher, and it's super inexpensive. I think I linked it below this video, but you can basically hand place different card images of clouds, and they have a normal map and everything, so it looks like they have some substance to them. So I hand placed that to try to match our reference in the background here. And then finally I use some slight, if we look at the reference here, we can see there's some slight coloration in the background where it's a little orange here, you can see, or not orange, sort of purple. Orange kind of shifts into this purple color. And the way we achieve that here is we used a color correction window, which is a flat color correction plane that we can put over the background and move around, and everything behind it you can see is going to be that orange color. So that is pretty cool. And if you want to create it yourself, you can always find those under the drop down here under, I believe they're under volumes. Yes, and then color correction window and region here. So that is the background. Drop any questions in the chat if you have them on what I covered so far. But I think I'll jump into talking about the sort of mid and foreground here. So if I look over here, what we're using is a metahuman, which I built using the metahuman creator, and then I used the skeleton for the metahuman, and I put some new clothes on it, which I showed you how to do in the previous streams, which is basically skinning the upper body leather jacket onto the metahuman, which allows us to actually keep the metahuman rig and position it. If I click on that, you can see here we still have the possibility to move the metahuman and whatnot. So I use that to create Mad Max himself. And then the foreground is just a lot of placing of little rock pieces to fill this out. And then we use an additional PCG volume to randomly place small rocks and whatnot in the foreground. And these are all assets I downloaded off Quixel Bridge, with the exception of the car here, which is a super cool asset, which is kind of what inspired me to make this whole image with you to begin with. We downloaded that off. I forget the name of the artist who built it, but it was super inspiring to me, and I have linked that below the video, and definitely support them if you so choose as well. So that's basically the anatomy of this shot real quick. Hopefully that was somewhat understandable to those of you who are just joining. And like I said, you can watch the previous streams to figure out in more detail how we set that up. But what I have planned for this stream, like I mentioned, is we're going to be getting this shot ready to render. And the first thing we have to do is add a little bit of animation to the camera. So if I look at my reference here, and we look at this shot, which is our reference, we notice there's this slight movement of the camera down. And it's actually technically called a pedestal, is the technical film term, but it's really just translating, just moving down, and it's probably a little choppy for you on the stream, but it's slowly speeding up as the camera moves down. And we're going to be using that animation in our shot here. So I'm going to take that and close it. So let's make that animation. So I've already created a level sequence, which you can do by right clicking in the empty space, coming to cinematics and choosing level sequence here. So I've made that level sequence and I've created a camera using this camera button in the left corner here. And so now let's animate the camera. I don't exactly know how long it's going to take to do that full move down, but I've positioned this camera near the sort of top of that motion. So what we need to do is click on the camera itself, and we're going to expand it. And I went ahead and already set a keyframe for this camera. Right here you can see that is basically a bookmark for the position. So if I accidentally moved it, it would snap back for me. And those of you who are new to animation, a keyframe is basically which is represented by these red dots. It's basically the bookmarking the position of that object, in this case the camera, at that point in time. So it's saying at this point in time, basically this should be the focal length, this should be the transformations on it, this should be and everything you've keyed, that's what it'll save it at that point. And the way we make animations is we literally just add an additional position at a different point in time. The computer will interpolate in between those two positions. And of course, this is over simplistic, because when we have more complicated animations, obviously we have a lot more keyframes. If we're animating a character, we're moving different body parts, and each of those body parts has hundreds of keyframes on them, and that's how you create like complicated motion. But for a camera here, it's not going to be too complicated. So I'm going to actually drag over these keyframes and move them to the beginning of my sequence at frame 000. And I'll just go ahead and make sure that I have set a key on all the transformation tracks. I'm actually going to expand this up here, which are translation, rotation, and scale. So I've set a keyframe on all of those tracks, and I'll contract them here so you can see. This is really, we want to make sure that when we're setting our keyframes that we don't set it on just location or just rotation, because I do that automatically. I do that by accident sometimes, and then it doesn't save the actual position of the camera. Anyway, so we have now this keyframe at the beginning, and the way I would do that if I haven't already set the key is I would just click this button here, or I believe S. If you have transform selected and I hit S, I believe that sets a key as well. Same as Maya or some other 3D packages if you're familiar. So I'm going to delete that. And so we have our starting position here. I'm going to come to the end of our sequence. And when you're animating your camera, obviously you can move it by navigating with your key commands inside of Unreal Engine, but also you can't do that from when you are looking through the camera cuts track here. So I have my little camera here selected. Hello, Alex. Welcome from Greece. Thanks for joining. When I'm looking through my camera cuts sequence, if you're familiar with Sequencer, when you click on this camera icon, it will look through that camera that you have in your sequencer. And right now I'm looking through the camera cut, which is just kind of just the length of time that we're looking through the camera. It's a little secondary track that tells us we're looking through this camera at this time, which seems redundant unless you have multiple cameras, and then it helps you cut between them. So if I want to actually, navigate through the viewport and change the position of my camera in order to animate it, I need to switch it over to actually look through the camera instead of the camera cut. So you can see here, if I click on the camera, nothing happens, because obviously still looking through the camera, just from the camera actor. And now I can actually position this in a new position. But I personally find when I'm animating cameras that I don't like to do it that way. I find that it makes it a little hard to control. So I usually just rotate, scale, and translate it from the sequencer, or you can come over here to the right side and do it from the details panel. So I'm going to go over here to the location, and the Z is the up and down axis of the camera. So I know we needed to move it down. So I'll come to the end of the sequence here, use the Z to move it down, and I need to just reference my shot here to see where we start and where we end up. So he kind of is in the top third of the, or top half of the image here at the end. So we'll keep moving down here. Yeah, maybe like that. Looks about right. Set a key on transform again. And then we'll come to the position at the beginning. And now you can see it's automatically interpolating between those two keys, which is great. But I did notice that in the reference here, we had a very slow start to the motion. And then it kind of slowly increased in speed as it comes down. So we want to add that in as well. And again, just stop me if you have a question, if something is not making sense, or you are curious about something here I'm doing. So I actually think it needs to be a little longer too. I'm gonna make it 200 frames long. So I can come down here and add 200 into the first number here and drag it over. And then when I drag this little track up here, it drags all the animation underneath it for the asset, which is super useful. That was an update, a recent update to the engine. You can see here, if I use this little bar up here, I can drag all my keyframes. Oops, it's hard to select here at the end. And if I had multiple keyframes here, it would actually expand it, which is pretty cool. Okay, so I have that. And what I'm gonna do, I think I dragged it too far though. Oop, oop. Sorry. I need to make this a little longer so I can actually select my keys at the end. That's something I find a little annoying. When you have keys right at the end of your sequence, sometimes they're hard to select them. Okay, so let's just have it be there. And at the end, I want the motion to be speeding up. So let's talk about animation tangents. Drop in the chat if you know like anything about animation tangents. But basically each bookmark that I mentioned before that is saving the keyframe where the position of that object is at each point in time has a tangent, and the tangent is telling the computer whether how you're blending out of that keyframe. And the easiest way to look at this is in kind of a grid. So I'm gonna switch to unlit here so it's a little easier on my system here, and I'm gonna come here to the show animation keys and curve editor button, and if I open that, it's going to show me the motion of all of whatever object I have selected in the format of a graph. So I'm gonna expand transform here and come to location, which is Z, the up and down, and we can see this is our two keyframes. This is our camera animation. And we can see that it slowly smooths into the motion and then smooths out. And this is because of the tangents. And the tangents, if we click on the key, you can control like this. But we can also come to this keyframe and switch it from a auto tangent, which means it's going to automatically try to make it smooth. We can either move it ourselves or come here and switch it to a linear tangent, which means no smoothing. So if I right click on it, switch it to a linear tangent, now it's not going to smooth towards the end at all. But it also doesn't give you any control. So I'm going to actually switch it back to automatic, and now I can actually control how quickly it accelerates. And that's what this curve really is. It's how fast our motion is accelerating over time. And so the time is the X position moving from left to right. And the up and down is whatever axis you're animating. So in this case, it's Z. So it's very visual. In this case, it's directly connected to the up and down position. So let's see how that looks. Pretty good. Although if I look at my reference here, I believe it accelerates a little faster. So it's very slow up until halfway. And then I feel like it accelerates. So we're just going to add a little more acceleration here to our animation. So I'll bring up the keys again. And select transform. So I'll bring up my keys for it. Go to Z again. There we go. And so another control we can use for these tangents when we're animating is weight. So if I right click on this and choose weighted tangents, now I have a new handle which I can use to expand the curve a little bit. So I can have it go really slow until about halfway through the shot, and then it starts to speed up. And this might seem like extremely complicated if you are not familiar with animation, but it starts to get easier with time. You start to kind of look at these curves and actually find they are one of the easiest ways to modify the motion. Because you start to, you know, more easily make a connection between like kind of the angle of the curve and the axis that's moving, things like that. So this is actually looking pretty close to what I want. It's going very slow and then moving down. Let's look at it in lit mode. Great. I think that is looking pretty close to the reference. I feel like maybe one thing I could do is it's for the first like 15 frames, it almost looks like it's not moving. And I think it's a little bit accelerating too slowly. So let me open up my graph again. This part is good, but here where it's almost flat, we can see that it's not quite moving enough. So what I can just do is angle that slightly. And that way there'll still be some motion at the beginning. It'll just be slow. And then it accelerates. Cool. All right, so that is our animation for our camera. If you have any questions so far, drop it in the chat, but I am going to start setting up this scene to render now. So now we have our camera animation, everything is here. I am going to start setting up my render settings, and we're going to be using render queue for this. So I can open that by coming over here to my render queue button on the left, or I can, you know, come up to window. I believe it's somewhere up here as well. Forget where. Anyways, so I'm going to click this little button, which is going to pop up my render settings. And if you haven't used Movie Render Queue yet, it is basically a way of capturing, since, you know, Unreal Engine is real time, rendered in real time, but you can use this to boost the quality a little bit and spit out a slightly higher quality result than even what you're seeing through your viewport. So if you're very happy with what you see through your viewport, which I am actually pretty happy of how this is looking, then your renders are going to be even just a little bit better. So that's pretty exciting step in the process. So I'm just going to double check that it is using the sequence that I am using, which is correct, and the map which I'm using because it references a sequence and a map. And to change these settings, I can come to the settings and click on it. And this is an ultra wide format, so I need to adjust my resolution to match. Like you can see here, if I expand my sequencer, I'm using this ultra wide frame, which is also called CinemaScope. And CinemaScope has a very particular reference. I'm going to be rendering this in 4K, so I need the 4K version of that, which is 4096 by 1716. So I'm going to come over to my render settings and type in 4096 by 1716. And that is what I'm using. And I could adjust my custom frame rate here to, I think I animated in 30, so maybe I should keep that. Probably the film is, actually I'm not sure if it's in 30 or 24. Probably 24 because that's often the frame rate that's used in film. But I know specifically on this, they played with frame rate a bit, so I'm not 100% sure on Mad Max. So now I have my resolution, and I can double check where I'm rendering it to, which by default, I'm not going to change. I'll show you where it is after we render it. And the rest I can just leave here. And I'm going to choose this plus settings button here and choose anti-aliasing. This is the setting I always add no matter what render I'm rendering. And in the anti-aliasing settings, this is where we can actually adjust it to render at a slightly higher quality than what we're seeing through our viewport as we're working. So spatial sample count here is this is a little confusing. So we have two options here: spatial sample count and temporal sample count. And if I'm being honest, I am still learning through testing exactly what is the best settings to render out depending on what type of shot it is. Because spatial sample count is really good for shots where you don't have a lot of sort of movement and motion blur, spatial sample count, but temporal sample count is really what you can use for moving shots. So I have sometimes been making it 5 and 5, which is usually given me pretty good results, but lately I've been experimenting with leaving the spatial count as a pretty low number and increasing the temporal sample count. And we have to make sure to override anti-aliasing, otherwise it's not going to use these settings. So I've been experimenting with this sort of thing, which has been giving me faster renders, and it seems that the quality is not really degraded too much. And so I mean, we could even up this to 10 maybe, and they're kind of multiplied by each other, so if you increase them at once, they will kind of boost your render times quite a bit. But something like this honestly will probably give you pretty good results without you needing to do too much. So let's try this and see how it looks, and then we'll up the samples from there. But if in doubt, you can always also try the 5 and 5 if your shot has, like, I don't know, some movement. Also, something I've noticed sometimes when you're rendering out like Niagara effects and things, if you have a problem with the speed, what you want to do is keep this at 1, spatial sample count at 1, because for some reason increasing spatial sample count will cause your Niagara effects to like render in this sped up fashion. So it's just something I've been noticing as I'm working. So we're going to start with this 1 and 8, and we're going to see how the quality is for that, and we'll adjust from there. Welcome, PJ from Atlanta. I like Atlanta. I visited Atlanta. Okay. So next we sometimes can, under settings, also add game overrides as a setting. And this is gonna like give you the most high quality results on everything, but with my graphics card, which is a 2080 Ti, some of you probably have newer graphics cards, but it crashes for me with all of these settings turned on. So sometimes I switch them off, or I mess around with each of them, and to see what I can get away with with my current setup. So honestly, you can get great quality renders without turning on game overrides, but just walking through what it does, it will boost your quality settings to cinematic, which you may have already have set up. Texture streaming, it will disable. So if you're getting any kind of lower quality texture outputs in your renders, this is something that will fix that. It will force all of your objects that use LODs, so levels of details that pop in at different levels of detail depending on how close you are. It will force them all to be the highest quality, or disable them here. Use high quality shadows and shadow distance scale. This is basically making your far away shadows just as high quality as your close shadows, and overriding your distance scale messes with those sort of optimizations to make sure that everything in the distance looks perfect, everything close looks perfect. And flesh grass streaming is if you have any, I'm pretty sure it has to do with just the I don't really know what that is. I don't really know what that does. I guess it has to do with your grass simulation. Maybe your kind of your material you set up on your foliage. Maybe it does something with that. And virtual texture feedback factor, I don't actually know what that does either, but kind of most of these really just boost your render settings up as high as possible, and for me often crash my card. So our goal here is to get the best quality render without crashing, and in my case while streaming at the same time. So we'll see how that works. So I'm going to actually not override texture streaming, leave these. I'll try to keep the shadows up, and I'll turn off some of these settings, and keep it at cinematic quality settings. I think that will be okay for us. Okay. And we will render out JPEGs just because it's easy, but if I was using this on a project that I was delivering for a client or something like that, or I need the highest quality renders, I would usually use an EXR sequence as the image sequence to render out. So I would click on that and turn off JPEG as the option. And you can see it's rendering at 16-bit. And usually PIZ is a good render format for that, or compression format. So we'll stick with JPEGs for now, but just know if you're using these settings to render out something for a final project, that's what you should use. Okay. I think the rest of these are pretty good. What I am going to do is I'm going to save this in case we crash as a preset. So I'll come up here, save as a preset somewhere. I'll just call it 4K render settings. And let's see how it goes. I will render, since I don't want you to be basically on a choppy stream as I'm rendering, I'm just going to render a few frames so that we can look at them, and we won't do the full shot, but I think you can deduce what it would look like. And then I will probably post the final render after the stream on one of the Instagrams, which you'll see at the end of the stream. So if you want to follow those, you can see the final render. But I'm just going to go here and hit render local and see what happens. So you can't see it because it showed up on my other screen here, but we're rendering. Just give it a minute. Feel free to drop any questions in the chat in the meantime. Let's give it a minute. Looks like it'll take just about 50 seconds to render through here. Which is pretty cool. I have found sometimes when I don't do my samples in an efficient way, I end up with a really humongous render times without actually any quality difference. So it's really important to like really learn your render settings and make sure you understand them. So I'm going to minimize this and I'm going to come to my renders, my movie renders, and open them up and see what we got. Looks good, looks good. So that's our final render. I will point out I'm getting some little black bars at the top and bottom here, and that's probably because I wasn't super scientific with how I adjusted my ultra wide frame here. So I would probably, you know, looking through my camera, I would probably adjust this in my camera to get rid of them. The sensor width and height, I would actually look up what are the real sensor width and height for CinemaScope and put them in here to make sure I'm matching the resolution. But besides that, it's looking pretty good. Okay, so that is our final render. I know I learned a lot through this stream, so I hope the previous streams that we were building this, so I hope you all enjoyed that. And I am curious if you all have an idea about what film you would like to see built next. I'm completely open to that and welcome it. So definitely drop that in the chat. And I'm about to do a giveaway for my Unreal Engine course package, which I will just take a few minutes to walk through exactly what that is and why you might want it. And then I will do the giveaway and I will send you on your merry way. But in the meantime, put in the chat what you'd like me to build next. This stream was a little bit on the shorter side, but usually we just spend a whole hour building everything from start to finish. So I've been having a blast with these. So yeah, let me know what you'd like to do what you'd like to see next for that. And if you would like to be entered into the giveaway that I'm about to do, put a little fire emoji in the chat now so I can do the actual giveaway. So let's talk real quick about what actually is Unreal Engine Filmmaker. So Unreal Engine Filmmaker is something I built with the goal of trying to help beginners with Unreal Engine, or just beginners to 3D animation in general, make their first cinematic short film or animation sequence project in under 30 days. So basically take them from not knowing too much, not being super comfortable, or maybe knowing certain parts of the process, to the full process of making the full film in under 30 days. So that is the goal. And just to give you an example of the kind of thing you would be able to build through this program, I made this film in under 30 days as well, using just Unreal Engine as a single 3D artist, which is wild to me because that did not always used to be possible. So these tools have really empowered that sort of creation. And so I'm very excited to share this with whoever is curious at also doing this for themselves. So that's why I do these live streams. That's why I made these courses. And yeah, so how do I get you, not being super familiar with Unreal Engine or 3D animation or filmmaking in general, how do I get you to the point of doing this? And the way I do that is through a sequence of courses and different resources that I built to help you along that process. So obviously I start teaching you the interface and stuff, so that's in there, but also I give you a full course that's based around world building. So kind of the stuff that we did to build this shot, landscapes, 3D assets, lighting, materials, that sort of thing. And then I also give you a guide, which I'm just about done working on, to teach you how to approach lighting as a 3D artist. Then we get into virtual filmmaking. So there's another course about how to actually make animation and shots and choose your angles, have them go into an edit and edit it in DaVinci Resolve with sound effects and music. And there's also included as a bonus a master class where I do that whole process again as well. If you've done my free training, which you can find below this video, that's basically the free training, but just in more detail, show you all the buttons I'm pressing. And then as a bonus as well, I've added in a weather effects, Niagara weather effects course. So some of the people who have seen that short film that I've made, it's a sandstorm that's slowly building and it's very kinetic. And so I wanted people to be able to make their own. So snow, rain, different weather effects using Niagara. And then finally, you send me your project and I give you a review. I help you to get it over the finish line or take it to the next level with a video review that's just for you, where I talk through everything. And so this is a process that you could complete in under 30 days if that is something that you're into. And a lot of people who have taken it have really enjoyed it so far. So that is wonderful. If you'd like to read those reviews, you can head over to Trustpilot. So this is the full course package, and I'm really excited to give it to one of you here who are watching. But if for some reason you do not get it this time, I'm also offering this to at a 40% discount, which is in the link below this video, which you can find. So if that's something that you're into, you can find that for the next few hours. It's just a link that will expire in the next few hours. So definitely jump on that. So I'm ready to do the giveaway. And let's see here. And the course package goes to Gilliam. Welcome, Gilliam, to Unreal Engine Filmmaker. All you have to do is email I1 to info@azelarts.com and I'll get you set up. I've seen you on a bunch of streams, so I'm super happy that you are finally getting to jump in. Your patience paid off, I guess. But the rest of you who are joining this, or you find this video later in the next few hours, definitely jump on that discount. If you also would like to join the fold. All right. So thank you so much to those of you who joined me for this live stream. Definitely you can still comment on this video if you have ideas come to you later that you'd like me to also cover. But I've super enjoyed, building this shot for Mad Max with those of you who joined each stream, and I'm very excited for what we could build next. So I just hope you, receive something from this process, me walking you through what I'm doing, talking through my process. I hope it inspires you in some way to pick up these tools and start building stuff for yourself. And I hope you have a wonderful weekend, and I will see you in the next one.